Hi guys, so I am here to talk about the first 8 chapters of California. If you haven't read the first 8 chapters of this book yet, I suggest not watching this video because I will be talking about spoilery things. Also, I have only read the first 8 chapters, so if you've read beyond that point, please do not provide any spoilers in the comments or anything like that. So in case you guys didn't know, this is taking place in sort of like a near future. The approximate year is around 2050 because they make a mention to flappers, which is about the 1920s, and the main character Frida makes a comment about how that was about 130 years prior to this point in the book. So it's around the year 2050, so everything in this book feels very familiar, but just slightly beyond that point, like something has gone just very wrong in the way that our world functions, and so there's just these desolate areas, and they were like major natural disasters that came to America and just really destroyed towns and completely like killed people because they were just so extreme people couldn't survive through it. There are things like oil shortages, which seem very realistic if you pay any attention to environmental news, and people are sort of separating into these ultra rich communities that are trying to be sort of self-sufficient or taking care of themselves, and then everyone else who's sort of just left to live on their own or take care of themselves. The two main characters are Frida and Cal, who are basically living in this cabin in California. They moved there from the Northeast because California has a more steady weather state, so you don't have to worry quite as much about things like flooding or snowstorms or anything like that. The first chapter or so of this book is a lot of just setting up the situation, and I have to say that for me personally, it kind of was hard for me to get through, not in the sense that it was bad, but in the sense that it was kind of anxiety inducing. Like everything that's talked about in this book feels very realistic and feels like it could/will happen in the near future, which is very scary to think about and a scary thing to imagine, which is also kind of the point of these type of dystopian novels. They're supposed to be forcing you to critically think about the trajectory that the current world is on and the problems that it could face in the near future. You know, with books like 1984, the idea of Big Brother being sort of this always watching state doesn't seem that far off these days, and even things like the Hunger Games where you watch people kill each other for sport also doesn't feel that far off, or just like the way that they portray the Capitol and things like that. So you can very much see the world that we currently live in becoming like the world in California, which was very, very scary to see. I don't have complete thoughts on say the characters who have been presented so far in this book because there's been a lot of setup, and I feel like they are setting up a lot of questions about these characters, and so it's hard for me to form full opinions because Edan Lepucki has done a really good job of creating these sort of complex characters, and it's hard to see any of them as being really good or really bad. Like they've all gone through complex situations and they've all made choices, and not all of them were perfect choices or the best choices or anything like that, but they've made these choices and they're sort of just trying to deal with the consequences of those choices. They admit to not being perfect people in this book, especially Frida, the main character. She knows that she can be difficult and have sort of spoiled tendencies and things like that, and she admits to it in the book. And of course, the one big thing that must be talked about is the revelation that happens at the end of chapter 8. So when Cal and Frida are sort of going on this adventure and they come to the spikes and they meet that person, I forget his name, who basically guides them through the spikes. Once he recognized who Frida was, I had two guesses about what was going to happen. The leader or the community was either going to have Micah or it was going to have Tony. Part of me kind of wishes that it had Tony because I was very intrigued by Tony as a person or as a character, and I was kind of hoping that they had found where she had gotten to, which is something that's sort of left off, and I'm also kind of hoping that even though it doesn't happen now, it might happen later on in the book. But the fact that they found Micah is really interesting too, because at the beginning of the novel, or not at the beginning, but you know, earlier on, they mentioned that he was a suicide bomber, so it's assumed that he killed himself for the cause, whatever the cause was. So the fact that he's alive definitely has me intrigued. It makes me want to keep going. The fact that I showed self-restraint and didn't read the next chapter just shows how committed I am to making this video with no spoilers in mind of what's coming up next. So suffice it to say, I'm definitely very intrigued by this story. I'm going to keep reading, obviously, but I'm very excited to keep reading. I have no idea what's coming up. I'm assuming something big, especially with the reintroduction of Micah. There's definitely something afoot, and I have a very strong feeling that Frida is going to make some very poor choices in the future. So we'll see how that that goes. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the first 8 chapters of California. If you've read them and you're participating in the Reblog Book Club, feel free to leave your comments down below letting me know what you've thought so far, what you thought of the big reveal, things like that. Or if you've got any predictions about the upcoming chapters or what's going to happen in the rest of this book, feel free to leave those guesses down in the comment section. Again, no spoilers. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.